have a couple more speakers before lunch, and I just wanted to start off and talk for a little bit about what we've heard so far, and then talk about the leadership compass that pertains to the consumer identity and access management work that we've been talking about today. There's a regulatory compliance angle. We've heard a lot about GDPR, and we've heard a lot about UMA as a potential solution for that so far today. We've heard about anti-money laundering in depth, and then yesterday we also heard some of the drivers are knowing your customer better and what the benefits of knowing your customer better will bring, and then also using CIAM as a means to get there for that. So in conjunction with the conference, we're releasing a new leadership compass document today. And it's about customer identity and access management. So, again, to kind of go over some of the differences that we see between what we think of as traditional IAM versus customer-facing. IAM, in the old days, and still today, had mostly been about employees. Building the infrastructure for employees to be able to get identity and access management. And some of the things that we think of there are, Kerberos for authentication, smart cards for, high assurance authentication, and some forms of hardware tokens. Then, the attributes that we collect from the users in this case are usually used for authorization. And this is structured data that can live mostly in LDAP range quite broadly. It's fraught with problems, as we all know. But it also includes social logins. People are happy to use things like Facebook Connect, Twitter, LinkedIn, other existing accounts that they have to both register in comparison to being provisioned, and pull information from their existing social accounts to start accounts with other companies. And then also mobile login. That's become a very important way for consumers to be able to get access not only to their mobile apps, but to other sites that might be related. And again, the attributes are not necessarily for authorization, but more for knowing your customer. And they include not just structured data, but unstructured data as well. So from an architectural standpoint, we see things above and beyond just LDAP and SQL. There's lots of NoSQL and big data types of structures and systems and applications that are involved in some of these customer identity management systems. And we tend to think of it as being a little bit lighter weight, but OAuth and OIDC have become much more important than things like SAML for the most part. It is the federation protocols for CIAM systems. And one of the concerns, the overarching concerns that we have is privacy rather than access control. So I showed these briefly yesterday. Again, looking at e-commerce and IAM, the way it historically started out, everything was siloed. Everything, people on the inside, users, employees, directory, and then you have people on the outside. But over the last few years, we've seen the firewall come down, so to speak. We've got more people crossing back and forth. Instead of just entering data into CRM and trying to track what people do in a more manual way, one of the benefits of CIAM is we're actually collecting this information directly from the users themselves. So with CIAM, the self-registration, the notions of progressive profiling, asking people, not for all their information at once, but ask them a few questions at a time to gather information transaction by transaction to build a better picture of what it is they want from you as a service provider or a retailer. So this doesn't do away with CRM systems, but it definitely complements the information that's there. And again, it starts to blur the lines between the inside and the outside of companies as well. So for the Leadership Compass, when we put it together, we've got a methodology that we follow. And that is start with identifying the criteria that we want to evaluate, and then the vendors that we want to survey. So CIAM's been around for a while, but it's still fairly new in most people's minds. So how do we differentiate that from IAM? So we started with looking at some of the existing products that are out there, talking to customers, reading about what's available, figuring out what are the key criteria that we think we should rate a vendor's product on, and then identify those vendors. Once we've collected this information, we contact the vendors to participate, send them a questionnaire, quite extensive, excuse me, in this case. And fortunately, most all of the vendors respond to the questionnaire and provide lots of information for us to evaluate. Going through the evaluation, it's a pretty objective process. We take a look at the questions and we can rate them according to different categories, and then sort of set the ideal, say like the numbers of authentication and industry norms at the time. And then another important part of the process is actually interviewing both the vendors themselves to hear from them what their capabilities are, find out a bit about the roadmap, and see where they're going with their products, and then also talk to some of their active customers, find out how well is it working for them, what were some of their key objectives in trying to deploy a CIAM system, and have they been met? And then also getting a bit of information about the vendor, have they been satisfied with what's been provided so far. So again, culmination of that, we take all the rating materials, put it together, and then prepare the final report, which, as I said, is I believe going up today. And we'll give you a look at some of the information contained therein. So the vendors that we talked to for this particular report are ForgeRock, Gigia, IBM, iWelcome, JanRain, Login Radius, Microsoft, Okta, Ping Identity, Salesforce, SAP, and SecureOff. So a look at the criteria in a little bit more detail. We thought registration was very important. How do users actually register? So most offerings seem to have self-service portal registrations that allow links to social networks to pull information, say from Facebook or Twitter, or you can generally use any open ID that you've got as a basis to starting a registration as well. Many also offer bulk provisioning, through either LDAP or SCIM interfaces to get things started easily. Authentication, that was an important differentiator I found. Again, most always have username, password as an option, and then a variety of the social logins. It depends on how much support they wanted to give to the different social network providers. And then there are different mobile apps that can be used, and then biometrics as well. And again, looking across all the vendors, a lot of times, depending on what their target customers were, target industries that they were going after, actually influences which authentication options are commonly deployed in their products. Lastly, on the user experience side, customer experience, almost all have the capability of being white labeled for seamless branding, so that you can plug in a few pieces of code on your website and it looks like you're just doing the authentication locally. It doesn't look like that you've necessarily farmed out all the action to Facebook, which goes for the seamless and integrated branding across all your different sites. Again, most can do single sign-on if you've got a large set of related but distinct web properties. You can use a single sign-on across all of those. Security and privacy, fraud detection. Obviously, there's a never-ending list of breaches in the news day after day. So how do sites that are going to implement things like CIAM prevent or lower the risk of getting hacked in an attack like that? So, many do user behavior profiling, try to get an idea of what's normal for a user in terms of geographical location or IP address, or even some of the things that they normally would do. If it's a retail site, maybe they have a certain range of product that they normally look at. Sometimes looking at something beyond that from a different IP address or different geographic location can set off an alert. There's also the possibility, and some do, integrate with third-party threat intelligence providers. And I think this is an area where they all really need to go in the near future. There's a lot of good information out there from many, many different sources. I think the problem in integrating threat intelligence is being able to weed out the noise from the important signals there. There's so many different threat intelligence providers. But integrating this into your product can be helpful in terms of, again, reducing the risk of people using compromised credentials on your sites. Privacy management, again, we've heard much in the last 2 days about GDPR and the need for privacy. Going forward, I think the fine-grained consent mechanisms that we've talked about are absolutely essential in the next 18 months or so to be able to comply with GDPR. And there are also best practices in terms of providing consumers with the privacy that they want. So besides the consent mechanisms, we need the ability to edit, export the data upon request, and then delete customer profile data. And there are some differences in the implementation between the different products, which ones can support all of those different features right now and which ones don't. I would imagine that, again, in the next 18 months, most are going to have to support all of those different features to be GDPR compliant. On the security side, we're looking at administrative security of the application itself, how it integrates with SIEM or real-time security intelligence, and then what are the strong authentication and authorization options for consumers. And that really is tied to what the use cases are that they're trying to support. Talking to one bank, no one wants to use their Facebook login to log into their bank and make mortgage payments. But they also, it's acceptable to do that for things that might be lower risk, like if it's a hospitality or an entertainment site, using social logins is quite acceptable there, but it seems that people have an aversion to linking what they think is their personal life to their financial life. So on the marketing side, excuse me, it's important to draw a distinction between what I would think of as identity analytics. On the one hand, just how is the system itself functioning, how many logins, how many failed logins, how many password resets or changes to customer profiles. That information, ideally would be available through the CIAM system itself. If not, it's very important to have interfaces to other programs that will allow you to do reporting on that. On the marketing side, again, a little bit different. There's different kinds of information that are collected. There's lots of different kinds of reports that are available in some of the CIAM packages. Being able to sort transaction data, let's say, by age, gender, income, and pull in social media activities as well. And then again, if the CIAM system doesn't provide this natively, being able to have an API to get access to this information is probably important, depending on what your actual intended use of the information would be. And then lastly, tying that in with marketing automation, some of the vendors provide native support for that. Others do it through API, and there are some that offer out-of-the-box integration with a bunch of different third-party marketing automation tools. So here we are looking at how they scattered out in terms of the product. This will be available for people to take a look at. As a result of attending the conference, we're going to provide everyone with limited time access to this report and others. So, I would say it speaks for itself, but you probably wouldn't agree. The information here, again, you know, it kind of moves from left to right, and what you're seeing is a culmination of the answers of many different questions and ratings, and subdividing the ratings. But in overall product leadership, we see Ping Identity, Gigia, Salesforce, and iWelcome. But I think it's important to remember that, you know, the ratings are there for a reason. They do help drive purchase decisions, but you know, it's important to read all the detail and to think about what your own specific needs are for a CIAM solution, because there are a lot of differences in the products as well. I mean, most of them have many of the same basic features, but how they implement them or what they choose to focus on varies greatly between each vendor's product. So it's important to not only look at the ratings, but look at some of the detail that's behind the ratings as well. On the market leadership side, we see Salesforce, Gigia, IBM, and Microsoft. Understanding Microsoft is a fairly recent entrant, but out of the gate they have extremely large customers. So market leadership is determined by a number of different factors as well. You know, the number of customers, size of the company, size of the, how many consumers are using this device, the market leadership graphic here. You know, in innovation, you know, we look at innovation as a, you know, a really key thing to differentiate the products as well. And the way we determine what shows up on this chart is based on asking questions about roadmaps, about what's currently supported, some of the technologies that we think are important today and will be even more important tomorrow. And we've heard about some of those today already from some of the speakers, things like Luma, you know, biometrics, and you know, how that can be used in CIAM systems. So when you look at this chart, you see iWelcome is out front, followed by Gigia, and ForgeRock, Salesforce, and Ping followed closely behind. And then we put it all together in the overall leadership chart, and we find Gigia in the front, again closely followed by Ping, ForgeRock, and Salesforce. As I said, all these will be available for you to download later today, I think. So, again, it's just important to take a look at all the detail behind the charts, as well as looking at the charts themselves. There's multiple ways to look at it. The information that is provided is represented in some of the text behind the chart as well. So, with that,
what's the vertical axis?
Yeah, same question.
In this case, nothing.
It's very simple. It's just really read it from left to right. So left follower, usually very specific offerings, or when you look at market leadership, rather small players. Challengers, the one who are challenging the leaders at the end of the day, and leaders to the right. The other is just to enhance readability, so vertical sort of dimensions only, that we don't have just a single line of it. And that's why we have more than 2 axes, and having 3 axes or more in one figure doesn't work well, so we split it into a couple of different views.
So are there any questions? Any questions at all?